Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genres that I think you guys will enjoy. If you have similar taste in music as me, it's always a fun chance to be able to talk about the things that have really been exciting me in the world of music. And this is a little bit of a different one. I've been struggling with this review for a few weeks now. I wasn't sure if I was going to put it out, but I've been so obsessed with this record, and I know it's gonna end up on my year-end list. I feel like I should talk about it on the channel and let you guys know about it. It's Geordie Greep's The New Sound, and I think this is a wildly creative and innovative record that has really blown me away. It's not my typical style. You could even argue maybe it's not in the traditional prog sense. You know, it's definitely has a bit of a post-punk aesthetic and art rock side to it, but there's definitely elements of progressive rock, I think. What's great about Geordie Greep and Black Midi and all of these new young bands in this scene, this post-punk, you know, art rock kind of scene in the UK right now, this is showcasing what may be the future of prog, like at least in broader terms. You know, of course, I love artists that evoke similar feels as the 70s progressive rock giants, and I love that sound, and I love that style. Most of my favorite artists evoke that classic prog sound, really. But as the title of the record suggests, I feel like these bands and artists are doing a new sound in progressive rock that fuses a lot of different newer genres together, has a more fresh approach, and feels like something that can be sustainable as a new side to the genre. A lot of people talk about how a lot of progressive rock nowadays can actually be a little bit regressive and is kind of going against what the term progressive actually meant. It's not really moving the genre forward. It's looking backwards. It's taking its cues from something that happened, 40, 50 years ago. And so some people complain, like, how can you call it progressive rock when we're not really progressing? But I think there's different things happening. There's the big capital P prog, which is a style of music that does things in a very particular way, mostly like Yes and Genesis and Jethro Tull and these older 70s bands. They had a very specific style, and of course it's expanding beyond just your typical 4-minute rock songs into stuff that can take cues from other genres, that can expand into longer epic pieces of music, and that can utilize lyrical themes that are beyond just what's typical in mainstream music. And I think there's a difference between that and something that's truly progressive, that's trying to take the genre to a new level, that's trying to introduce new elements and trying to do something different than what you've ever heard before. And this album and other artists in this vein are doing more of the progressive style of trying to bring the genre forward, do things new that you may never have heard before in a new and fascinating way. And I think it's a really cool thing to observe. And some of these bands, I'll be honest, are not always palatable to my ears. I've struggled with Black Midi because they've kind of been the figureheads of this movement, so to speak. And I've struggled, to be honest, with their records. It has that sort of angular, cold, kind of weird, avant-garde nature that's really hard for me to really fall in love with. It's very challenging music. It's not just immediately accessible upon first listens, but as you dig deeper and uncover the layers, you really find what they're trying to go for, and it's an interesting puzzle, and it's fascinating. I compare them a lot to King Crimson, who does this as well, who really tries to bring the movement forward of music and trying to, do things that are unique and introduce elements, and sometimes it's not always pleasant to my ears, but it's always innovative and interesting and creative. And that's really the world that this group of musicians inhabits. Hellfire was the previous Black Midi album in 2022, and that's the one that really brought me into this world and got me interested in this scene, because I was fascinated by a somewhat conceptual album with varying degrees of different things going on. Very wacky, very interesting in its approach. And I also really fell in love with Black Country New Road, which I think also falls in line in this similar movement, maybe in a more post-rocky kind of pleasant, more slower direction than some of the frenetic pace of Black Midi, but also very innovative and progressing the genre in a lot of ways. Their album from the same year was Ants From Up There, which I really, really love. I think that's a fantastic record. So here we are with the new sound, which is Geordie Greep showcasing his talents as a solo artist on the heels of announcing his departure and the disbandment of Black Midi. So it's interesting. I think a lot of people were interested to hear what this would sound like. Would this just be more Black Midi music? Would he really put his own unique individual stamp on this? And I think it's a little bit of column A, column B. I think there's a lot of Black Midi DNA in this music, in this album, but I think he also forges a new path, of course, you know, a new sound. And a lot of this is brought about by how the album was recorded and was composed and brought together, because he utilized a lot of Brazilian musicians in the recording of this album. Half the tracks were done in Brazil with local musicians pulled together at the last minute who had never heard of anything that Geordie Greep had done before, but were interested in his demos. And the tracking was all done in 1, maybe 2 days. And so we have a bit of that Brazilian flavor and this kind of jazz rock vibe that wasn't really much of a part of Black Midi's sound, and kind of adds a more accessible angle to the music. It's something that's gotten me into this music a lot easier than some of the Black Midi stuff, because you have these really cool jazz rock workouts. You have this almost Steely Dan type style undercurrent, some samba feel, some flamenco style guitars, some jazz tinge sections that just are really pleasing and enjoyable to a listener who's just trying to take in an album and enjoy the musical variety on display. And these musicians really bring a lot of that heart and flavor and bring a lot of their homeland and this Brazilian feel, which I think is a fascinating aspect to introduce and to bring together on this fascinating record and piece of music. But Greep has a really interesting delivery and tone and style. Sometimes he can sound a bit like an old-fashioned crooner, you know, obviously inspired by people like Frank Sinatra. But then sometimes he can just do this really kind of odd, quirky talking style vocal, this auctioneer style, just fast, you know, several words per minute, just crazy style, frenetic, fast-paced talking style. And I think both sides of the coin are really interesting, and it is different ways of doing storytelling that are both equally fascinating. And I think this dichotomy is really at the heart of this music that I'm kind of trying to convey, and maybe not doing the most perfect job at it. But I think what's interesting about this album and this music is that there's an undercurrent of this smooth jazz kind of style, this crooner, like old-fashioned big band that's very warm and inviting and, you know, immediately accessible, and you have a reference point to get you right into the music, into the album. But amongst that, there's this frenetic craziness on top of it. There's sections that are very, you know, angular style, King Crimson workouts, these frenetic, like intense moments where the music's just punching you, and the vocals as well, with these like frenetic, almost like intense vocal workouts, and, you know, crazy lyrics that showcase a lot of intensity. And I think that's a really cool aesthetic for the album, and it's really brilliantly captured in the lyrics as well, where a lot of the characters on display here, a lot of the personality that's being discussed are these toxic characters, this like toxic masculinity, these people with this really calm, cool bravado on the forefront who think they're all that, who think they're just this like macho man and you know, ladies man, so to speak, and who have all these desires and bad thoughts and are trying to showcase their clout. And so you get that kind of smoothness, that bravado, that, you know, this machismo, so to speak. But as the songs progress, the smooth exterior kind of slowly unravels, and you get to see the fragility inside, that these people are deeply flawed and have very big insecurities beneath this kind of bravado exterior. And I think that's indicative of the music, where it starts smooth and accessible and enjoyable and slow, and then it gets into this frenetic pace. It keeps building in intensity as you uncover the layers and start to discover the hidden depths within these characters that are you know, showcasing that they're just fragile underneath, that this ego that they portray is all just a front, and that there's actually some really terrible things inside that they're dealing with that showcases maybe some humanity, even though on the outside they're just these horrible people that are being uncovered. And to be honest, the lyrics have always been a difficult point for me with this band, and particularly with this album, because it's very dark, and some of the lyrics can almost be kind of vulgar in their expressions. You know, there's talks here about prostitutes and about sexual endeavors and exploits, and that's usually not my kind of thing. I'm usually a pretty tame person who likes, you know, more positive, uplifting lyrics and more heroic figures to follow in my musical endeavors. But I'm fascinated by the storytelling angle, and I think this is an interesting type of person to explore. You know, it's almost like watching a movie about a serial killer and like being really fascinated in their psychology and what causes them to do what they do. I think it's kind of a similar thing where this album is allowing you to delve into the psychology of this individual or individuals and see why they act the way they do and how they are underneath this kind of bravado exterior, and seeing the core person underneath, and that they're not that much different than you and me, maybe providing some sympathy for these outwardly terrible human beings. And I think that's a really interesting magic trick that's pulled off throughout the album. And the lyrics are so pervasive and so upfront and important to this music. Even me, who's typically not a lyrics guy, still pays attention, and still those things come out, and I can really feel the expressiveness of the vocals and what is trying to be conveyed in these messages and in these stories. These are all just like interesting vignettes. And I've heard some discourse that some people consider this almost like a concept album, and that this could be almost construed as a narrative of one particular protagonist and his exploits and endeavors in various situations and circumstances. Or you can view it as kind of each song's its own vignette, its own short story, its own exploration into similar characters, but maybe not necessarily the same character running throughout a narrative of the album. But either way, it's fun to uncover and unravel and unpack these characters and these really convoluted lyrics. There's a lot of words per minute, as I said, and it's really fascinating and intense and interesting. Blues is the first song on the record, and it proves to be an interesting bridge from Black Midi into Geordie Greep's solo work, because it has a lot of that Black Midi style and serves as a bit of an overture for the album in general, because it starts more calm and serene and, you know, starts a bit more mundane, but then it continues in its intensity, and you know, you get deeper and deeper into this as it gets frenetic and as you uncover those layers. And it is a great exploration of what you're going to be seeing throughout the album of these characters, and how ridiculous they can be as they let their egos and this bravado kind of take over. Terra is when you first get into like the official new sound of what this record's going for. This Brazilian samba style feel, flamenco guitars, jazz tinged piano, bit of a crooner style in the vocals, some Latin added horns and backing vocals. Fantastic track. And it just keeps going from there in these like more Brazilian Latin themed style tracks. The new sound, the title track, is purely instrumental and is a really great exploration into this jazz fusion-y type territory with Latin flavor. I love Holy Holy, which was like the first single that came out for this record. Killer 70s style groove and Latin type feels, maybe even a Latin jazz meets disco rock kind of feel to this. It's just a great track that's very accessible, that gives you that kind of Steely Dan style vibe, but still has this characteristic unhinged lyrical quality to it that Geordie Greep's known for. Walk Up has a bit of that Steely Dan jazz rock sensibility, but then you get a bit of that wild King Crimson musical abandon as well. Through a War has this Latin jazz flavor with some ferocious vocal work going between the crooner and auctioneer style vocals that Geordie does. It's fascinating to me how it can almost sometimes have this kind of schmaltzy big band style feel, but then some furious jazz rock fusion vibes as well. the way that Geordie kind of morphs and weaves between these different musical genres, some that can almost feel a bit cheesy and old-fashioned, and some that feel a bit frenetic and angular and strangely modern, I think is a fascinating thing that he's doing. One of my favorite tracks is As If Waltz. Fantastic, has this almost sleazy 70s disco feel and these more angry kind of intense lyrics, but then it lightens up in the chorus with this light poppy waltzy feel to it. It even has a bit of a classical kind of angle to it. Really fascinating, different kind of feel for the album, and well needed, because I feel like Motorbike that comes before it can be quite intense, has this very crazy Crimson-esque ending to it, has a guest vocalist, Seth Evans, who comes from HMLTD, giving this richer, deeper, darker tone. Really interesting guest spot for him. And then we get The Magician towards the end, this big sprawling epic track, which is just this big exploration into this vocal tirade that just continues to get more intense and crazy as it continues onward and tells this very emotional and very personal story. It's feelings of yearning and things that you wish you could have but are only really available in dreams, and in reality you just feel empty because you can't have what you really want. And I think that feeling's pretty universal. So it's just a fantastic extended track that showcases the best of what Geordie Greep does in this building of intensity and emotion, and showing this great story with music, you know. And I think it's really cool how Geordie Greep really marries the music with the lyrics, that these songs are very expressive musically and lyrically, and the music really showcases what he's trying to convey in the words that he's telling you. So he's a storyteller at heart, and that's what a lot of the best artists are. And it's just a fantastic record. I can't deny the brilliance, the artistic genius of Geordie Greep. He's one of those rare talents. He's a young guy. I believe he's like 25 years old, but he's coming up and crafting these really brilliant, sprawling albums that are very fascinating and in-depth character studies, and are very complex both lyrically and musically. And I love the dual nature of this, how it's accessible on one angle because of the more jazz rock Brazilian side with the Steely Dan flavor, but it doesn't sacrifice the crazy frenetic nature of Black Midi as well, where there's these crazy intense buildups, these angular kind of strange guitar works, these really complex harmonic sections that take a lot of different instruments and weave them together in a really fascinating new style. And I'm all here for the new sound from Geordie Greep. I think this may be my favorite album from this collective. I maybe prefer this to any of the Black Midi records, if I'm being honest, because I just really enjoy that Brazilian Latin feel that he introduces here. It's just very pleasing to my ears and brings a more accessible angle, which is basically what I was missing from Black Midi. So if you're adventurous and want to explore something, I know for a lot of people this may just not be for you. Either the lyrics are just a little bit too upsetting or too vulgar for your ears, I can understand, or the music's just a little bit too chaotic and strange and out there and avant-garde, I can understand that as well. But if you're willing to give it a shot, I think there's something really interesting here that could grab a lot of ears and maybe even surprise you. I think there's a lot here to uncover and a lot of hidden depths that I'm still uncovering, even though I've listened to this at least a dozen or so times in depth as I prepared for this album review. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully you appreciated the review. Let me know in the comments if this is something you've heard and what your thoughts were about this. I'd be very interested to know it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Sorry for a bit of a longer review, but I had a lot of thoughts on this one apparently. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you in a future episode. Bye everybody.